you went to Bharat at the age of 13. You were just a teenager. And,
Yes,
my
yes.
straight feeling is, what did your parents, where were your parents in this decision of yours of going to Bharat and spending so many years there? Tell us, what made you fall in love with Bharat?
Hmm. Okay, so naturally at that age, obviously, one doesn't quite understand what's happening. But as I look back, now I can narrate and understand exactly what happened. So basically, I was very lucky. I lived in a very good family. We were very privileged. We've lived in some very beautiful places in Australia. And my last residence when I was a child was on the northern beaches of Sydney. We had an amazing home, and life was amazing. Now, what happened was my father was a psychiatrist, and my mother, when I was born, she was a ballerina. So I was the first child. So she had to give up ballerina. And then she thought what to do. So she started to learn yoga and she loved it. And then she became a yoga teacher. And then when I was about, I think, 11, my father decided to go to the United States to study something called transactional analysis, which is some part of psychiatry. So my mum, being very independent and also uh, understanding, so this is in the late 60s, early 70s. To fly was incredibly expensive. To go to another country was for very few people. So my mum said, we've spent so much money on my father, now we're going to spend money on myself. So she searched and she found the largest, quietest, probably one of the most proficient yoga institutions in the world, and it's based in Bihar. So she went there for 8 weeks. And at that time, life was very simple. It's not as complicated as it is today. You didn't need visas and things were much, much easier, even though maybe it was for a few people because it was so costly. So she spent 8 weeks and she did an advanced teacher's training course in Bihar. And she met this Swami, this sadhu that she really liked in the institute. And she gave him a ticket, basically, or gave him the means for a ticket and said, come to Australia. So you can imagine, I was probably at 11, 11 and a half. I come home one evening and I had my own room overlooking the water and it's absolutely beautiful. And I walk into my room and for the first time in my life, now I'd never met an Aboriginal, I'd never met a Chinese, I'd never met an Indian, never met a foreigner in my life. And there is a yogi in Padmasan in a Langoti with a shaven head on my bed. So you can imagine, it aroused my curiosity to no end. And I think he stayed with us for about 6 weeks. So that is where the journey began and the powerful samskara I had about him. And I was very young, but we had some amazing experiences with him. So that sowed the seed. Now, once again, I said I was privileged because there was a reason. Every year, my parents would send me to my grandparents by aeroplane. So we would fly from Sydney to the Gold Coast. And once again, that was a very big luxury. Very few people did it. So I was thinking to myself after I met this yogi, if mum can go, why can't I? But the problem was dad's a psychiatrist, and I knew dad would not say yes. So I had to think about it very carefully and think about a psychiatrist and work out a way to go forward.
Clever.
So So I said that I was not doing very well academically, basically because I was too happy with my life. Swimming, sailing, fishing, doing all the things that you would do, in paradise in Australia. So I said to my father, I said, look, every year we go to the Gold Coast to meet the grandparents. How about next year you send us to India? And before he could say no, I said, but there's a condition. And he loved that. He said, what's the condition? I have to either come first or second in the school. And he naturally blubbered out, of course, thinking that it'd inspire me, but I'd never become first or second. Now, I got all the yogic books and I started my practices. And I'm only 11 and a half year old, reading about astral traveling, the Theosophical Society, all these chakras, Tibetan Book of the Dead. I was reading all these things. And my father started to get worried because he started getting reports from the school, unbeknown to me, that I was topping my sports because I was doing yoga nidra. at the end of my, and then they were testing my blood pressure and everything. And I was doing incredibly well because I was doing meditation. So my retention was much higher and I was getting better marks. So my dad panicked. So what did he do? He took me out of a beautiful local government school and put me in one of the most expensive private schools in Sydney, where the brightest kids are, hoping that would be, and I had no idea about this, a barrier for me or getting first or second. And lo and behold, I think I was 12, finishing my year 12, I came second in the school. So I got my ticket for 8 weeks. So that's the beginning of the journey. So anything's possible at any time of your life if you put your mind to it, regardless of the barriers. There's always a pathway. And that has been my whole journey and my whole life, doing the impossible.
Testing the boundaries or crossing the boundaries, it looks like. So you said 8 weeks you were given.
Absolutely.
So then what happened? 8 weeks
Yes.
of spending time in
Well,
Bharat,
yeah. Once again, after 8 weeks, my dad turned up there in Mongear and he's ready to take me home. Now, unbeknown to me, I didn't know about his youth. And I said to my father, how about I spend a year here? And he automatically said yes. And I only found out many years later that when he came from a very poor family. His father was a carpenter and a very honest man. And they were so poor that my dad had to work outside of school and his grades were very poor. So he actually failed the last year of high school. But he was also much younger than the other kids. So he had to repeat the last year of high school. He topped that. And then he went into university and he topped it all the way through. So I know in his mind, he could understand that if I spent 1 year in India, in the Gurukul, there's no problem. I'd be bright enough to catch up when I got back. So I extended that 1 year to 11 years.
Please remember to subscribe to us and switch on the notifications for this channel. For our other social media links, more content, and to support our work, please visit citti.net. Dhanyavad. Namaskar.